Hey everyone, it's Rob B here with Rob D, and it's a painful episode this week because Rob and I are going to share 7 disasters that have gone wrong with our property portfolios in the last 12 months. It's a painful episode, but by sharing our pain, you can learn the lessons.
Yes, welcome to the Property Podcast. Thank you for joining us. In case you don't know, we've got a company that bought over £100 million worth of property for our clients last year. You can find out about that at propertyhub.net/invest. But today, we are sharing the painful experiences that property has put us through over the last year. But to delay that moment for a couple of minutes, let's have a quick look at what's been in the news this week.
So, Rob, a massive news story of the week. Not everyone may have heard this has happened, but it's absolutely massive for property. We finally have the full details of the Renters Reform Bill because the bill has passed through the House of Commons. And you've recently, very recently, in the last few days, created a YouTube video which gives all the detail. But I thought it'd be interesting, actually, before we give our reaction next week, let's give the reaction of YouTube to this news, because this video, after 24 hours, has already had over 100 comments. There's a lot of people have a lot to say on this subject. But before we get into what people are saying, let's give everyone the headline of what is happening with the Renters Reform Bill and what it means to them as a property investor.
Yes, so I'm going to assume that you know the background to this, which is that it's a big bill that's been going on for more than a year, bringing in various changes to reform the rental sector, of which the big one is the change to tenancies. So now all tenancies, rather than being 6 months, 12 months, whatever, they're all going to be open-ended. They will run on until you've got a good reason to end it. That good reason can be selling it or moving it back in, but it can't be no reason at all. No fault evictions are going to go away. So if you want a tenant to leave, you must take it to court and you must provide a reason that they agree with. This bill has been debated, it's been amended, and then when it finally passed the House of Commons, there were 3 changes that are good news for landlords compared to the previous version that we saw. One is that there now will be a minimum term. So previously, tenants could move in, give 2 months notice on day 1, and effectively use it as a short-term let. That's now not the case. The second is that there's an exemption for student tenancies. So student landlords will still be able to make sure that properties are available for new tenants who move in September. And the third one is that the implementation of existing tenancies becoming open-ended and therefore not being able to be ended with the no-fault procedure will be delayed until there's been a review of the courts and the government believes that the courts are ready to handle the extra workload that this will bring. Now, there's actually more to it than that. The way this has been reported in the press has been pretty inaccurate, I would say. So next week, we'll need to get more into the detail of what this transition looks like, as well as giving our response. But Rob, as you alluded to, other people have been responding as well. Normally, YouTube comments are just telling me to iron my t-shirt, so I'm really pleased that this one sparks more debate than that.
Out of the 100-odd comments, I've found one unemotional, rational one, which says, excellent summary, thank you. But it goes downhill from there. So I don't even know where to start with these comments, Rob. But let's have a crack, and then I'd love your reaction to them because you've created this video for everyone. So let's dig in. As an ex-landlord of 20 years, my advice is, in caps, never rent out property again, ! In the UK. Labour and Tory are hell-bent on waging war on landlords, holiday let and second home owners, as they are now far-left zealots who use legalisation and taxation to stop ordinary people from making money and owning assets. It's going to end badly for both tenants and property owners in the UK. So this seems like everyone's lost, Rob, and no one's ever going to make money again in the UK, which is exactly what both governments want, apparently.
Well, my reaction to that is give that person their own radio show. They need to be on LBC doing the breakfast show, because that's going to get the phones ringing.
That's a lose-lose-lose situation if that happens. I can't even read some of these, Rob. They're pretty wild. How about just the simple, owners won't rent, landlords will sell up. This is ridiculous. As you said, we're going to get into this next week, but do you believe there's going to be a landlord exodus off the back of this?
Well, I think what can sometimes get missed in the emotion of all this is that something like this already exists in Wales. There are far more tenant protections in Scotland than there are in England and in many parts of the world. And as far as I'm aware, in those parts of the world, people do still rent out properties to other people. So I think we can quite quickly knock the most extreme parts of this on the head. That doesn't mean that there won't be some amount of pain and chaos as this takes effect. And it's complicated even more by the fact that we could have a change of government. You could even say it looks likely that we'll have a change of government soon after this comes into effect, and that new government may want to change what's about to go into law. So this is now past the Commons, it's gone to the Lords. There'll still be some time before this gets signed into law, which we assume will be before the general election, but it's not out of the question that a summer election could be called, which will really shake things up again. But basically what I was trying to say, Rob, is there's a lot of moving parts here, so I think we'll need to give this a lot more time next week.
Yeah, let's do that. But let's end with one more comment, because I'm not sure we'll get to this next week. And it's politics, and I don't know why I'm going near there, but I'll just take the bait. I wouldn't reply to the comments on YouTube where nobody would care, but I'm going to talk to thousands on a podcast instead. So this comment says, Labour will completely destroy buy-to-let. What we have to remember is this has not been put forward by Labour, and this is the Conservatives that have put this forward and proposed this bill. And I think it's fair to say that the Conservative policies have moved into quite Labour-ish territory already with housing and other areas. They've kind of converged in the middle, both Labour and Conservatives. And to me, there doesn't seem to be too much difference. But what I wanted to pick up, Rob, is in the comments, a lot of people have agreed with this statement and then said that Labour will completely finish off buy-to-let when they bring in rental controls. Labour have distanced themselves from rent controls. I mean, there's a lot of noise that people just repeat as truths. And I'm not saying it will never happen, but I would say it's highly unlikely based on the noises that Labour have made, plus the track record Scotland has delivered since rent controls have come in. So do be careful. Maybe don't look at YouTube comments. We've just been dragged in. But if you do want to look, we'll link to this video in the show notes. But watch the video before you read the comments and come up with your own balanced opinion. And maybe don't do what we've done and stray into those comments, because YouTube comments are a bit of a wild place.
Right, so before we move on to the lighter material of disasters, let's just look forward to something more positive, which is that we are going to be reviewing your deals on the show in future weeks. We did this years ago and it was great, so we want to do it again. If you've got a deal that you are considering, you can send it our way for our opinion. We will pick out a few to go through live on the show. It'll be really good fun for us, and it gives you an outside opinion on your deal, which you may be able to learn from. So if you've got a deal that you're looking at and you'd like our opinion, just go to the show notes, find the link, fill in that form, and we will be picking some out to go through on the show very soon.
So after 10 years of podcasting, passing on our knowledge as property investors, and investing for even longer than that, each of us building pretty decent sized portfolios, you'd think that we've been nailing it. No problems, no mistakes, no errors on our part. Far from it. I'd love to say that it was plain sailing all the time when it comes to property, but the truth is, it's not. But yet, nobody talks about it. Everyone tells you about their wins, there's lots of bragging, how successful they are. No one talks about the stuff that goes wrong. Well, we don't like that. For some reason, we like sharing our failures and our troubles, and that is exactly what we're going to do on the podcast this week. We're going to give you a list of things that have gone wrong in the last 12 months in our portfolios. And in one of the examples, something that's gone wrong in the last 2 weeks. Rob, this could be a painful lesson, but it's actually going to be really instructive as well, because we'll give our thoughts on this at the end. But let's entertain. Let's share the misery. Let's start sharing our experiences. But you're going to go first.
Most of mine, I think, are from the last few months because I've got no long-term memory. So I'm sure more bad stuff than this has happened. But the first one that comes to mind is an irritating one because it was a leak from an upstairs flat. So it's one of those things where there's nothing you can really do about it. It's outside your control. But it's not the first time this has happened. It's like the third time. And it always happens overnight. I have no idea what they're doing up there. But we've had it before. There's been a bit of a damp patch. It's dried out. No big deal. This time, they must have really gone overboard with their paddling pool or whatever they were doing because water came absolutely pouring through the ceiling. Lumps of plaster have come off. It's an absolute mess. And the most expensive bit is the water got into the electrics as well. It started coming through the light fixture. And I did not get a GCSE physics, but I do know that water coming through your electrical circuit is not something that you tend to want. So I had to get it looked at by an electrician. I've actually gone and found the message from my PA so I can share the pain in full. Because it turns out it did damage the electrics, and the bill for the electrician alone was £454.08. He's got to go back for another visit for some reason. I don't even know what that is. And then we're going to have to get someone to come in and replaster and paint the ceiling as well. So that is going to turn out to be very expensive.
Nasty, Rob. Not nice. Not fun. But to make you feel better, I'll share something that I've had in the last 6 months. And what's played out in one of my properties is I let a property to a couple. And that couple have split up. It happens, and that's not nice, but it happened. And that, if it ever happens to anyone listening, should be the end of it. Maybe you need to rearrange the tenancy, and that is the end of it, if they're both on the same tenancy. But unfortunately, that wasn't the end of it. The gentleman involved in this breakup went absolutely nuts and kept coming round to this property over and over again. This property was in a small communal block of flats, not many properties at all. But he broke down the communal doors, he was causing havoc, antisocial behaviour, and the police have been called on multiple occasions. Just a bit of a mess. Now, it's calmed down, and it seems to have resolved itself. But that is not nice for my existing tenant, it's not nice for the neighbours, and it's not nice for me either, having to navigate myself through a very awkward and weird situation. Now, I'm the least important person involved in this group. Of course, that goes without saying. But it's just one of those weird situations that, as a landlord, you can't actually do that much, and you just have to listen, and you just have to go through the process and allow the right authorities to solve it. But a real mess of a situation.
Yeah, it's a really nasty one. And it's an example of this emotional side of property as well. And because you're dealing with people, you can get really drawn into this stuff. And I think some people can find property quite emotionally difficult for that reason as well. And I've got a bit more to say about that later on. So both the ones we've shared so far are factors outside our control, right? Nothing we could have done about it. But personally, at least, I've got plenty of problems that are of my own making as well. And the next one is an example of that. Because I've got a flat in a particular block that rents really, really well to students. And it rents well to other tenants as well. But there's always loads of student demand, and you tend to be able to charge a higher rent for students as well. So I've rented out to students loads of times, always ends up being a complete mess and needs lots of cleaning and bits and bobs done at the end of the tenancy. After however many tenancies, it got to a point where it's just like, this needs a complete refurb now. Can't patch over it anymore. So got it repainted throughout, put new carpets in, did a whole load of stuff, and got it looking absolutely beautiful again. It's like, right, now this time round, not going to let it to students. Learn the lesson now, especially now it's all nicely redone. Not going to do that again. But then got an application from someone who was the sister of a different student tenant that we'd had in a different flat who'd been fantastic. It's like, great. We had this person. They were great. Their sister wants it. Surely they'll be great as well. Not a problem. Fast forward 6 months, trashed again.
Oh, no.
Turns out siblings do not always have the same cleanliness habits. My failure here, Rob, is I grew up as an only child. I didn't know this. So yeah, I haven't seen the bill for what needs to be done this time. It's not going to be a complete refurb again, but it's just so demoralizing to see the checkout after the expense of getting it looking so great to start with.
Yeah, my very tidy and very organised sister will gladly tell you how siblings can be different, Rob. I think that tells everyone all they need to know about me. But you know what, Rob? I've got you covered because you've not learnt your lesson there, but I've absolutely messed up. I can't believe I've done this, and I'm embarrassed to actually share it on the podcast because the actions I took here would go against the advice I would give on, say, Ask Rob and Rob. I just had a stupid moment. And that stupid moment came on a property I purchased in the last 12 months. So as I've just purchased it, I got a tenant for the first time. And I was very happy when I got an offer in at the full asking price. Great rent, new property, really happy with the deal. Everything's awesome. Turns out though, the tenant had an issue with his credit and there was a CCJ. Now, the tenant had a very good reason for why this is in place, explained why it happened, and also produced some documentation to explain the story. Against my best instincts, I went for the easy option, the lazy option. Because what I should have said is, no, don't take the CCJ. This is a brand new property, brand new furniture pack. I'm not going to take you on. I'm sorry, you're going to have to look elsewhere. That is the advice I would give. For some reason, I just wanted to believe the story because I was so happy that we found a tenant so quickly. And I didn't research the information that he'd given to say why it happened. I just took it at face value. And I've paid the price. Because this tenant has either been late or in arrears pretty much since the beginning. And every time the rent goes above 2 months in arrears, which is when you can start to move that person out. There's a lot more to it than that, but that's kind of the trigger point in time. You get some rent in to take it under 2 months again.
I'm dealing with a pro.
Yeah, it's like this person's done it before, Rob. And I am the mug in this case. I'm not actually that angry or upset with the tenant. I'm cross with myself. If anybody else had asked me, should I do this? I'd say no. Why did I take the easy offer? Why did I take the lazy option? I do not know. I'm hoping the embarrassment and going public with the embarrassment will make sure I never do this again.
I think it will, because if it helps, I have done exactly the same thing in the past, many, many years ago, and I haven't done it again. It's the type of mistake I think you need to make once. I think you need to feel the pain from it to truly learn the lesson. I would have not advised anyone to do what I did. If someone had written into our Sunday Times column, I'd have said, no, don't do it for these reasons. I did it anyway because I was busy at the time. I didn't want to focus on it. Ended up in a repossession that dragged out for months. So yeah, lesson learned. The silver lining here, Rob, is you're not going to do it again. I'll move on to my next one. And you weren't alone with yours. I know I'm not going to be alone with this one either, because something else that's gone wrong within the last year is a down valuation. And I know that I'm not alone, because when we had a mortgage broker come and give a talk at our last Property Hub Select event, he said that well over half of the cases that he'd seen over the past year had been down valued. And in my case, the down valuation was about £22,000, which is chunky. That's about 10% of the purchase price. And it's one of those where there's no point contesting it with the valuer. That never, ever goes anywhere. I had plenty of time, so I could have reapplied with a different lender who used a different valuation firm and hoped for a higher valuation. I was very tempted to do it for a while, but in the end, I decided to just take it on the chin because I knew it was a good deal. And this is where having some experience and some confidence helps. If this is your first investment and you got a down valuation, you might find that knocks your confidence. You go, oh, am I overpaying for this? But I knew I wasn't. I knew I was actually getting a really good deal. I had the extra cash to put in. And yeah, it means that my ROI is going to be lower because I'm putting more investment in. Therefore, the return is going to be lower. But that's just a spreadsheet entry. What matters to me is what the property is going to achieve over the next 10 plus years, what it's going to be worth when I sell, which is going to be, I'm sure, a heck of a lot more, and the rental income it's going to bring in. So of all the things I'm sharing today, that's the one that actually bothered me the least. But I thought it was worth sharing, Rob, because that's something that a lot of people will have experienced over the past year.
Bothers you the least, but you know what, Rob? That's probably the one so far that's annoyed me the most, because I've seen it happen to lots of investors, and it winds me up. You've gone and got a brilliant deal. There's no way you'd invest without doing a brilliant deal. So you've got a property that is worth less than the asking price, because that's just what you do. You know, I've known you long enough now, and that's great. So for a valuer to then down value on your purchase, it's just bonkers. And some of the reasons I've heard on some of these down valuations is ludicrous. Like they're predicting what may happen in the future in the market. So they're predicting a downturn. I've never known a valuer to value up above what's been asked and said, you know what, I'm pretty optimistic about the market at the moment, so I'm going to write it up. That doesn't happen, does it? So why they feel they can predict the future one way but not the other is beyond me. I think I could do a whole podcast rant on this very subject, but I will refrain, and I will give you the next one on my list. And this one actually will cheer me up again, because this one actually made me laugh, which is crazy, because it's a list of disasters. It's not really a disaster, it's probably the tamest on my list, but it's just funny. This happened in the last 2 weeks. I have a property that is almost exactly 10 years old. So what happens after 10 years, Rob? You know, boilers break. Boilers are programmed to break exactly after 10 years. There's a little device that goes off inside that makes them shut down. And that happened here. I couldn't believe it. It's like, wow, okay, check the date. And yes, it is almost exactly 10 years since I purchased the property. Bonkers. £450 to fix. People talk about how boilers last 10 years. I'm starting to believe they really do. And a little part of me is wondering, is it set up that way? I don't know. Maybe I need to take my tin hat off. But that seems spooky, how it was almost to the anniversary, how it went kaput.
Well, you know, with printers, it's actually true. They're programmed to conk out after a certain number of pages, and there's been lawsuits and also. So maybe it's the same with boilers. Maybe you've uncovered the tip of a giant conspiracy, but probably just been unlucky. But you got to laugh, haven't you? And I'm glad that you were able to. Well, we promised you 7 disasters. I'll give you one more. And this is an annoying one because we had a tenant move in on a 12-month contract. And after 4 months, they got in touch to say, I've got a new job elsewhere. I'm moving out. And in that situation, it's technically their problem. They've signed the contract. They're on the hook for the full 12 months, so you can pursue them for the rent. But in reality, you're not going to pity them for the rent, are you? Because they'll be paying rent elsewhere. They're not going to be able to afford 2 sets of rent. You're not going to bother going through the courts. So what you end up with is a property that is empty. It sits there for a couple of weeks. You've got the whole cost of getting it let again, and it's costing you money when you weren't expecting it to. But fortunately, I'm actually going to end this episode on a positive, because there's a way of dealing with this that works really well. Not everyone knows about it, and we've answered this in our Sunday Times column before, because it's the kind of thing people get in touch about. But in England, there are very few fees that you're legitimately allowed to charge to tenants, but you are allowed to charge the costs of remarketing if someone leaves the property before the end of the contract. So what we did with this person is say, look, you're on the hook for the full 12 months here. So to avoid being on the hook for all that, you need to pay for us to relet the property, and you'll only have to pay the rent up to the point that we find someone else. So there was a whole relet fee that the agent charged. The tenant paid that directly. Then, of course, they were very helpful about giving access for viewings and making sure the place looked nice, because it was in their best interests for us to find someone as quickly as possible. And luckily for everyone concerned, only took a couple of weeks. The new tenant moved in, the old tenant was released. And unlike the flat I talked about earlier, they left it absolutely immaculate. So that's a way of dealing with that issue that not everyone knows about, but is well worth knowing about. And there you go, Rob. We've been through 7 disasters and somehow managed to end on a positive.
That is a positive, Rob. But what should people take away from our disasters? Maybe they've laughed or pitied us, maybe a mix of both. But why have we done this? Why are you giving us all the bad things that happen? Because this is the reality. When you build your portfolio up to a certain size, things go wrong. And you know what? It can even go wrong on your first one. And Rob, there's something you touched on that I want to pick up on, because I think it's really, really important. People over-index how property investment is going to be on their first property. So if everything goes well, people think property investment's easy. Conversely, when things go wrong, they think property investment is a nightmare and they need to get out. And neither is true. Property investment, for the most part, is all right. But it's a bit like life. Most of the time it's great, and occasionally things go wrong. And it's the same with owning a property portfolio. But when you only have 1 or 2 to reference your experience to, everything's exaggerated. Everything either feels brilliant or awful. That tends to be the way it goes. So do be aware, if you are about to start investing in property, or you only have 1 or 2 in your portfolio, don't think it's either really easy or really hard. It's neither. It's just that it seems exaggerated because of your experience. But as you build your portfolio out, these are just things that go wrong. But remember, we've shared our experiences over the last 12 months across quite sizable portfolios. Lots of them have just ticked along with nothing happening. And that's just part of the game. But I think, Rob, there's actually more to it than this as well. I want to ask you a question. Of all those things that you listed, give me the amount of minutes you lost sleep.
Oh man, none. Not even slightest. Not even close to it. But thinking back, that never used to be the case. When I started out, some of these I would have really worried about. Some of them would have made me really angry, because things that were other people's fault were costing me a lot of money. And when I think about, well, why? What's changed? Why am I not so bothered now? I think it's a couple of things. I think one is, of course, just experience. It puts things into perspective. That's what you've already talked about. I think another big one for me has been being more hands-off. Because I've not been involved in the solutions, I haven't had as much opportunity to stew about these situations. So when I get a message saying, oh, there's been this leak, it looks really bad, are you okay to approve this cost? And then move on and forget about it, and it doesn't stick in my mind. Whereas if I was involved in calling around for electricians or whatever, that would mean that my focus was on the issue for far longer. So I don't know if both of those things are true for you, but I think it's a combination of the two that have put me in this place where, yeah, you know, I'd rather these things didn't happen, but it sounds like similar for you. It's almost like you're in funny story territory immediately rather than being really upset about it and getting to the point of funny story like a month later.
Yeah, like you, I personally didn't handle these situations directly. I was informed about them, but I had letting agents to look after this process and deal with it. So yes, some decisions needed to be made, but that was about it. The actual doing wasn't done by me. It was just decision making, right? Let's fix that boiler rather than replace it. It was just simple things like that. It doesn't have to be hard. The mental side, that is harder because some people will get wound up by these things and some people won't. I'm very lucky the way I'm wired. These seem like small things in the grand scheme of life. I'm very fortunate where I feel I can choose what to be bothered by. And some things, you know, in my life I have been bothered by. But these things, they're not in that list, not even close. and you just accept it as part of the process. It's just what happens when you're a property investor. And when you approach it that way, when you just accept it as this is expected, then you feel a lot better about it. It's when you feel aggrieved or take it personally, that's when it eats you up inside. But if you go into property investment expecting things to go wrong occasionally, when they do, it feels a lot easier to process because you expected it. I think it will be harder, though, for those people who self-manage and do it all themselves. I can imagine it's harder to process it that way. But for people who are hands-off, I think it's easier to get to that place. It's time for Hub Extra now. And Rob, you've been a bit mysterious here because normally up front you say, I've got a Hub Extra and this is what it is. But you said, no, I'm not going to tell you until the podcast. So I am actually hearing this for the first time. So I do hope it's a good one because I haven't had a chance to veto it.
Oh, no, it's really good. I've written you a song.
Oh,
do you want to hear
okay.
it? So have you been following this AI music stuff?
I'm aware of it. I haven't utilised it yet. Sounds like you have.
Yeah. So basically, these new services have come out where you put in a prompt and it'll write you a song. So what's the default one here? It's like a song about an oath between nights, or a powerful disco song about not being able to wait to see you again. You put in the prompt and it spits out a song, and they're really good. Not necessarily stuff I choose to listen to, but given that all the instruments, all the voices, everything is completely AI created. They're not using samples. There are no real humans or instruments involved at any case. It's really quite incredible. So, of course, the first thing I did was get it to do a song about the property podcast. So you can either choose to give it lyrics or not. I got ChatGPT to come up with some lyrics. Then there are two main websites for this, which we'll link to in the show notes. There's Udio, udio.com, and Suno, suno.com. We'll link to both of those. So I put it in there, asked for an upbeat rap, because I thought, why not? That's the kind of thing that we'd both enjoy. So I thought, Rob, we could play out the show with it.
I think possibly for the first time in 10 years on the podcast, I'm speechless, Rob. But yeah, let's play it out. See you next week, everyone.
I did it. Yes. So see you next week, and we'll leave you with the Thursday drop.
Yo, it's Thursday, hit play, don't delay. Rob B and Rob D coming your way. The Property Podcast, the knowledge they convey for UK investors looking to slice.
Stacking bricks, no tricks in the property mix. Getting tips every week. They got the fix from north to south. They got the deeds, helping you invest, growing them seeds. Tune and turn up, they dropping that heat. With Rob and Rob, your portfolio's complete. Every Thursday, the vibe never missed. The Property Podcast, top of your list.